The arrival. The alien planet Nivera was a peaceful world. Its sky was purple, and its oceans glowed softly in the dark. The people of Nivara, the Nervans, lived in harmony. They had advanced technology, but no wars. For centuries, they believed their world was safe. But that belief was about to change. One quiet evening, the ground shook. A loud explosion roared in the sky. Every Nervan turned their eyes upward. A giant fireball was tearing through the atmosphere, heading straight for the planet's surface. The elders, wise and calm, immediately activated their advanced scanners to analyze the object. "It's a starship," one elder said. His voice trembled with fear. "But its design. It's not like anything we've seen before." The ship crash-landed in the middle of a dense forest. Trees burned, and smoke filled the air. The impact sent shockwaves across the nearby cities. The Nervans gathered at their observatory, watching the live feed from drones sent to investigate. The ship was damaged, its metal body bent and broken. But what worried them most was the single life form their sensors detected inside. The elder stepped forward, his face pale. "It's a Deathworlder," he whispered. Gasps echoed in the room. The Nervans knew the stories of Deathworlders. These were creatures from planets so dangerous, no one else dared live there. Deathworlders were said to be brutal, powerful, and nearly unstoppable. The thought of one being on their peaceful planet sent chills down their spines. "We must destroy it," another elder said, "before it awakens." "But what if it's not hostile?" asked a young Nervan named Vila. She was a scientist, curious and brave. "What if it needs help?" "Deathworlders don't need help. They only bring destruction," the elder replied. Despite the debate, a group of Nervan scouts was sent to the crash site. They carried energy weapons and wore protective suits. Their task was clear: investigate the ship and decide if the Deathworlder was a threat. Inside the broken ship, Captain Zara slowly opened her eyes. Her body ached, and her head was pounding. She was human, a Deathworlder from Earth, though she didn't think of herself as one. Her ship, the Resolute, had been attacked by hostile aliens, forcing her to crash land on this unknown planet. Zara struggled to move. She knew she had to act fast. Her ship's systems were failing, and the atmosphere outside was unfamiliar. She grabbed her emergency kit, which included a translator device, a plasma pistol, and a small toolkit. She spoke to herself as she worked, her voice steady despite the pain. No time to rest. Fix the comms, find shelter, stay alive. Her training as a soldier kicked in. Earth was a harsh world, and only the strongest survived. Zara wasn't just strong, she was relentless. She had faced monsters, harsh climates, and enemies who underestimated her. This planet would be no different. As she worked on repairing her ship's communication system, her sensors picked up movement outside. Zara froze. Something, or someone, was approaching. She grabbed her pistol and took cover behind a console. Her sharp eyes scanned the flickering monitors, showing blurry figures moving through the smoke. The Nervan scouts reached the crash site. They moved carefully, their weapons ready. The ship looked even more terrifying up close. Its dark metal gleamed in the firelight, and strange symbols were etched into its hull. The leader of the scouts, Terrell, signaled the others to spread out. "Be cautious," he whispered. "We don't know what it's capable of." The Nervans didn't realize Zura was watching them. She studied their movements, noting their hesitation. They weren't warriors, they were explorers. But their weapons looked advanced. Zara's mind raced. Were they hostile? Would they attack if she revealed herself? Before she could decide, one of the Nervans tripped on a loose piece of metal. The sound echoed loudly, startling everyone. Another scout, panicked, accidentally fired his weapon. The energy bolt hit a nearby tree, setting it ablaze. Zara acted instantly. She leaped out from her hiding spot, her pistol aimed steady. "Stop," she shouted. Her voice was commanding, filled with authority. The Nervans froze, their eyes wide with fear. To them, Zara looked like a predator. Her dark suit was scorched but intact, and her stance was strong despite her injuries. The stories about Deathworlders filled their minds, making her appear even more terrifying. But Zara didn't attack. Instead, she carefully lowered her weapon and held up her other hand. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said slowly, hoping her translator worked. "But if you fire again, I will defend myself." The Nervans stared at her, unsure of what to do. Terrell stepped forward, his weapon still raised. "You are a Deathworlder," he said. His voice shook, but he stood his ground. "Why have you come here?" Zara narrowed her eyes. "Crash landing. No choice. My enemies attacked me. If I wanted to harm you, I would have done it already." The Nervans whispered among themselves. Was she telling the truth? Could a Deathworlder be trusted? Before they could decide, a loud beeping interrupted them. It came from Zara's wrist device. Her face turned serious. "Something's coming," she said. "And it's not friendly." Back at the observatory, the Nervan elders watched the scene unfold through their drones. They saw Zara standing firm, her eyes scanning the horizon. And then they saw what her device had detected: an approaching fleet of Tylock ships, the most feared parasitic invaders in the galaxy. "Elders," one of the observers said, his voice trembling, "the Deathworlder may not be our enemy, but the Tylocks are here, and they won't stop until we're all destroyed." The encounter. The Nervan scouts stood frozen, their weapons trembling in their hands. Facing them was the Deathworlder, Captain Zara, a figure straight out of their most terrifying legends. Yet she didn't attack. Instead, she was calm, almost calculating, as she lowered her weapon but kept her stance ready. The soft hum of her pistol's energy core filled the tense silence. Terrell, the scout leader, swallowed hard. "Stay back," he shouted, trying to sound brave, but his voice cracked slightly. His comrades shifted nervously, their fear of the Deathworlder growing with every second. Zara raised an eyebrow. "Back? I've already given you a chance not to make this worse," she said, her tone sharp. She stepped forward, deliberately slow, and pointed to the burning tree behind them. "That was you, not me." The Nervans exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't how they imagined a Deathworlder to act. Weren't these beings supposed to be mindless brutes, driven by destruction? Yet this one seemed controlled, intelligent. "Who are you?" Terrell finally asked, his grip tightening on his weapon. Zara sighed. She had no time for this. Her instincts screamed danger. Something was watching them. Something far worse than these frightened aliens. She adjusted the small translator device on her wrist and spoke clearly. "Captain Zara of Earth, I crashed here. I don't want trouble, but if you don't lower your weapons, you'll force my hand." The observatory on Nivara buzzed with tension. Elders and scientists leaned over their screens, watching the live feed from the drones circling the crash site. The image of Zara, standing tall against their armed scouts, sent a chill through the room. Her voice carried confidence, but her words hinted at something else, an edge of warning, as though she were holding back something far more dangerous. "She's stalling," one elder muttered. "No Deathworlder is harmless. She's just waiting for the right moment to strike." Viola, the young scientist who had argued against destroying Zara's ship earlier, disagreed. "She's not attacking. Look at her movements. They're defensive. She's scared of something." Her voice was firm, and for the first time, the elders paused. "Scared? A Deathworlder? Impossible," scoffed another elder. But Viola wasn't convinced. She replayed the footage, zooming in on Zara's face. Her sharp eyes weren't just watching the Nervans. They were scanning the treetops, the shadows, the distant sky. Something else was out there, and Viola could see it too. Back at the crash site, the uneasy standoff continued. Zara kept her weapon pointed downward, but her eyes darted to the forest behind the Nervans. The sounds were wrong, too quiet. The natural hum of the alien ecosystem had vanished. In its place was a chilling silence, broken only by faint clicks and hisses that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Zara's pulse quickened. She had heard those sounds before. "You need to leave," she said suddenly, her voice urgent. Terrell frowned. "Leave? Why?" "You're the one, Woe." Zara cut him off. "Listen to me," she snapped. "I've fought in enough battles to know when something's hunting. Whatever's out there, it's watching us right now." The Nervans froze. Their advanced hearing picked up the strange noises Zora had noticed. The clicks grew louder, closer. Terrell gestured for his team to form a defensive circle, their weapons pointed outward. "What is it?" one of the scouts whispered. "Trouble," Zara muttered. Her grip tightened on her pistol as her combat training kicked in. "And if we don't move now, we're all dead." In the dense shadows of the forest, glowing red eyes flickered. The Psylocke scouts, parasitic creatures feared across the galaxy, had arrived. Their sleek, insect-like bodies moved with terrifying precision, their many legs making no sound against the forest floor. They had sensed the presence of new prey, the Deathworlder and the Nervans. The Psylocks didn't just invade, they consumed. Entire planets had fallen to their swarms, leaving nothing behind but ash. And now, they were here. The first Psylocks emerged from the shadows, its chitinous body glistening in the dim light. It let out a high-pitched screech, signaling its pack to attack. Zara reacted instantly. "Get down," she shouted, firing her pistol. A searing bolt of energy hit the creature square in its center, sending it sprawling. But more appeared, their glowing eyes multiplying in the dark. The Nervans panicked. They weren't warriors. Their weapons were designed for research, not combat. Terrell fired blindly, missing most of his shots. Zara growled in frustration. "Cover me," she barked, charging forward. Her movements were precise, almost animalistic. She dived, rolled, and fired in one fluid motion, taking down 2 more Psylocks. The Nervans watched in awe. She wasn't just fighting, she was dominating the battlefield. At the observatory, chaos erupted. The elders stared at the feed, horrified. "The Psylocks," one whispered, his face pale. "They're here." Vila's heart raced. She leaned closer to the screen, watching Zora fight. "She's protecting them," she said softly. She could have left, but she didn't. The elders didn't respond. For the first time, they began to see the Deathworlder in a new light. Back at the crash site, Zara and the Nervans managed to hold off the first wave of Psylocks. The forest was littered with smoking, twitching bodies. But Zara knew this was only the beginning. "We need to move," she said, turning to Terrell. "Your weapons are useless against them. If we stay here, we're finished." Terrell hesitated, but the fear in his team's eyes made the decision for him. "Fine. Where do we go?" Zora glanced at the forest, her sharp mind already forming a plan. "There's a ridge nearby. High ground. We can set up defenses there." As they moved, Zara stayed at the back, covering their retreat. The clicks and hisses of the Psylocks echoed in the distance, growing louder. Zara tightened her grip on her pistol. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about showing these aliens what a Deathworlder could do. The real threat. The Nervans and Zara reached the ridge just as the last traces of sunlight faded, leaving the forest below shrouded in darkness. The group moved quickly, setting up what little defenses they could. The Nervans were still shaken, their hands trembling as they placed energy barriers and charged their weapons. Zara, however, was calm, her sharp eyes scanning the treetops and shadows for any sign of movement. Terrell approached her cautiously. He had spent years leading expeditions into unknown territories, but this was different. "You seem to know these creatures," he said, his voice barely steady. "What are they?" Zora didn't look at him as she replied, her hands busy securing her pistol to a makeshift holster. "They're called Psylocks. Parasites. They invade planets, consume everything, and leave nothing behind. They've wiped out entire civilizations." Terrell's eyes widened in horror. Why are they here? Is it because of you? Zora paused and finally turned to him. Her face was unreadable, but her voice carried an edge of frustration. No, they don't care who you are. If they're here, it means they've been tracking this planet for a while. My crash landing just gave them a reason to speed up. Back at the Nervan Observatory, panic was spreading. The elders huddled together, reviewing reports from scattered outposts. The Tylocs were no longer a distant myth. They were a present and deadly reality. Cities near the crash site were already reporting strange disappearances and sightings of glowing red eyes in the dark. We should evacuate, one elder said, his voice trembling. If we leave now, we might still survive. Evacuate to where? Vila snapped. The young scientist was pacing angrily. Do you think the Tylocs will stop with this planet? They'll follow us wherever we go. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Vila continued, her voice firm. We have a chance to fight. That Deathworlder, Zara, she knows how to deal with them. We should listen to her. Listen to a Deathworlder. Another elder scoffed. They are no better than the Tylocs. She's only helping because she has no choice. Vila shook her head. Then let her prove you wrong. At the ridge, Zara worked quickly with the Nervans, her years of survival training guiding her every move. She tore apart pieces of her wrecked equipment, combining them with the Nervan technology. Rin, a young Nervan scientist, watched in awe as Zara's hands moved with practiced precision. How do you know so much about everything? Rin asked hesitantly. Your weapons, our technology. It's like you've done this before. Zara smirked but didn't stop working. Earth isn't an easy place to live. Everything there is trying to kill you. You learn fast, or you don't survive. Ren tilted his head, his curiosity overcoming his fear. But why fight so hard? You could have left us to deal with this alone. Zara's expression hardened. She looked at him, her voice low but intense. Because running doesn't solve anything. You stand, you fight, or you die. That's how it works. The Tylocs weren't idle. In the shadows of the forest, they gathered in greater numbers. The scouts Zara and the Nervans had fought earlier were just the first wave. Now, larger and more dangerous Tylocs joined the swarm. Their sleek black bodies reflected no light, and their glowing red eyes seemed to pierce the darkness itself. Their movements were coordinated, almost mechanical, as if they shared a single mind. High above, the Tylocs mothership loomed, its massive, spiked silhouette blotting out the stars. Inside, the Tylocs hive leader observed the planet below. The Deathworlder intrigued it, a lone being capable of resisting its scouts. The hive leader sent a command through its telepathic network. Study her, learn her weaknesses, she will fall. At the ridge, Zara gathered the Nervans for a quick briefing. She had used the ridge's natural rock formations and the Nervans' energy barriers to create a choke point, a place where they could funnel the Tylocs into a trap. We don't have much time, Zara began, her voice steady. They'll attack again soon, and this time, they'll be smarter. We can't rely on your weapons alone. They're not strong enough. Terrell frowned. Then what do you suggest? Zora pointed to a pile of equipment she had been working on. Explosives. We'll lure them into the choke point and detonate these charges. It won't stop them completely, but it'll slow them down. The Nervans murmured nervously. Explosives were a foreign concept to their peaceful society, but Zora didn't give them a chance to argue. You've seen what they can do, she said firmly. If you want to live, you'll have to fight like your lives depend on it, because they do. As night fell, the Tylocs began their advance. Their glowing eyes appeared first, dotting the forest like eerie fireflies. The Nervans stood behind their barriers, clutching their weapons tightly. Zara was at the front, her pistol ready. Hold your fire until I give the signal, she commanded. Her voice was calm, but her body was tense, ready for action. The first wave of Tylocs charged, their screeches echoing through the air. Zara fired, her shots precise and lethal. The Nervans followed her lead, their energy bolts lighting up the darkness. The traps Zara had set exploded in flashes of fire and shrapnel, taking down dozens of Dilocs at once. But for every Dilocs that fell, more took its place. The swarm was relentless, their movements faster and more coordinated than before. Zara's mind raced as she fought, searching for a way to turn the tide. In the distance, Rin worked frantically on a new device. Zara's modifications to their technology had inspired him. If this works, he muttered to himself, we might actually have a chance. Just as the Dilocs breached the outer defenses, Rin ran to Zara, holding the device. This will overload their neural signals, he explained quickly. It might give us enough time to escape. Zara nodded, her respect for the young scientist growing. Good work. Let's hope it's enough. As the swarm closed in, Zara activated the device. A high-pitched frequency filled the air, causing the Dilocs to screech in pain. They stumbled, their movements erratic. The Nervans seized the opportunity, firing with renewed determination. The battle ended with the Dilocs retreating temporarily, but Zara knew it was only a matter of time before they adapted. She turned to the Nervans, her face grim. This was just the beginning. If you want to survive, we need to take the fight to them. The Nervans, once hesitant and fearful, now looked at Zara with a mix of awe and determination. For the first time, they began to believe that they might have a chance if they followed the Deathworlders' lead. Preparing for war. The morning on Nivara's ridge brought no relief. The forest below, once vibrant and alive, was now eerily silent. Smoke rose from the battle's aftermath, and the faint stench of burnt Dilocs' flesh lingered in the air. The Nervans were shaken but alive, huddling near their energy barriers as they stared at the remnants of their first real fight. Zara stood apart, gazing at the horizon where the Dilocs' mothership loomed like a black scar in the sky. Her mind churned with possibilities, strategies, and risks. She had fought alien threats before, but nothing like this, a swarm so vast it could drown a planet in death. She turned to the Nervans, her voice cutting through their anxious murmurs. If you want to survive, sitting here waiting for them to come back isn't an option. We have to hit them first. Terrell, the scout leader, frowned. Hit them? Do you even realize what you're asking? We're not soldiers. We're scientists, explorers. This isn't what we do. Zara narrowed her eyes, her tone sharp. It's what you'll have to do. You saw what happened last night. They'll keep coming, and they'll get smarter. The Dilocs don't stop until everything's gone. Back at the Nervan Observatory, chaos reigned. Cities closer to the crash site were beginning to fall. Reports of missing citizens and sightings of glowing red eyes flooded in. The elders convened in desperation, debating whether to evacuate or call for help from neighboring star systems. They'll never get here in time. Vila snapped, slamming her hand on the table. The Dilocs will destroy us before any reinforcements arrive. Then what do you suggest, Vila? An elder retorted. That we place our fate in the hands of a Deathworlder. She's no savior. She's a liability. Vila glared at him. She's a fighter. She's the only one who knows how to stand up to them. If we don't back her now, we're already finished. On the ridge, Zara wasted no time. She gathered a small group of Nervans willing to fight, including Rin, the young scientist, and Terrell, whose pride wouldn't let him back down after the first skirmish. The rest of the Nervans hesitated, torn between fear and hope. First things first, Zara said, pacing in front of her makeshift war table. She had drawn a crude map of the surrounding area, marking key points of defense. You need to understand your enemy. The Dilocs are parasites. They work as a hive mind, which means they think as one. That's their strength. But it's also their weakness. Rin perked up. Weakness? How? They rely on a central signal, Zara explained, tapping the map where the mothership loomed. The hive leader. If we disrupt it, even for a moment, it'll throw them into chaos. That's when we hit them. Terrell crossed his arms. You want us to attack that? He pointed to the mothership in the distance, his voice dripping with disbelief. "We can barely hold this ridge." Zara shot him a glare. "That's why we're going to train. If you want to live, you'll fight like you mean it." Over the next few days, the ridge transformed into a battlefield training ground. Zara drilled the Nervans relentlessly, teaching them basic combat tactics, hand-to-hand defense, and how to aim their energy weapons properly. At first, the Nervans struggled. Years of peace had made them soft, unprepared for the harsh reality of war. "Keep your eyes on the target," Zara barked at Rin, who was fumbling with his weapon. "You miss in a real fight, and you're dead. Again." Rin adjusted his stance, his hands shaking less this time. He fired, hitting the target dead center. Zara gave him a small nod. "Better, but don't get cocky." While the Nervans trained, Zara worked on upgrading their technology. Using parts salvaged from her wrecked ship, she created new weapons: energy grenades, portable shields, and proximity mines. Rin, inspired by her ingenuity, began designing a device that could disrupt the Psylocke's hive signal. "This could work," he told Zara, showing her his prototype. "But I'll need more time to fine-tune it." Zara studied the device, her sharp mind already racing with ways to incorporate it into their strategy. "You've got 2 days. After that, we won't have time to wait." Meanwhile, the Psylocks weren't idle. From their mothership, the hive leader watched the Nervans' preparations through the eyes of its scouts. The Deathworlders' tactics intrigued it. Unlike the Nervans, she was unpredictable, a variable that Psylocks hadn't encountered before. The hive leader sent a command: "Focus on her. Break her spirit." The night before their planned assault, Zara gathered the Nervans around a small fire. For the first time, she allowed herself to speak openly. "Back on Earth," she began, her voice quieter than usual, "we learned to fight because we had to. Our planet isn't kind. It's dangerous, hostile, unpredictable. But that's what made us strong. We adapted, we fought back, and we survived." The Nervans listened intently, their fear slowly giving way to determination. "You're not soldiers," Zara continued, "but you don't have to be. You just need to remember one thing. Survival isn't about strength. It's about refusing to give up, no matter how bad things get." Terrell, who had been skeptical from the start, finally spoke. "And if we fail?" Zara met his gaze. "Then you fail fighting, not running." As dawn broke, the Nervans were ready. Zara had divided them into teams, each assigned a critical task. Rin and a group of engineers would carry the signal disruptor to the edge of the forest, where they'd attempt to jam the Psylocke's communication. Zara and Terrell would lead the main assault, drawing the swarm away from the disruptor team. The plan was risky, but it was all they had. Zara looked over her small army, a mix of scared but determined faces. She tightened her grip on her weapon and took a deep breath. "Today, we show them what it means to fight back." The Nervans cheered, their voices echoing across the ridge. As they marched toward the forest, the faint clicks and hisses of the Psylocks began to fill the air once more. The swarm was waiting. The turning point. The forest was alive with sound, clicks, hisses, and the distant rumble of the advancing Psylocke swarm. The Nervans, now armed with upgraded weapons and a fragile determination, marched cautiously under Zara's command. Every step they took felt heavier, their fear growing as the canopy above darkened, blotting out the sunlight. Zara walked at the front, her sharp eyes scanning the treetops. Her instincts screamed danger. The Psylocks didn't rely on brute force alone. They were hunters, calculating and patient. She knew they wouldn't launch a full assault until they found the perfect moment to strike. Rin jogged up beside her, clutching the signal disruptor. The device looked crude, a tangle of wires and glowing cores salvaged from Zara's wrecked ship and Nervan tech. He adjusted his grip nervously. "This thing better work," he muttered. "It will," Zara replied without looking at him. "But only if you get it close enough to the swarm's core." That's easier said than done, Rin said. The closer we get, the more they'll come after us. Zara stopped and turned to him, her voice firm but calm. That's the point. You focus on the device. I'll focus on keeping them off you. Back at the ridge, Terrell and a small group of Mervans had been left to defend their position. They watched Zara and the others disappear into the dense forest, their silhouettes swallowed by shadows. Terrell clenched his fists, his pride bruised. She thinks she knows everything, he muttered under his breath. She knows more than we do, said a younger Nervan, his voice tinged with fear. And she's willing to fight for us. Maybe you should trust her. Terrell didn't respond. Instead, he stared at the horizon, where the faint outline of the Psylocke's mothership loomed. Part of him hated relying on Zara, but another part, a growing part, respected her resolve. Zara's group pushed deeper into the forest, the sound of the Psylocke's growing louder with every step. The ground beneath them became slick and uneven, the air thick with a foul, metallic scent. They were close. Stop, Zara whispered, raising a hand. The group halted, their breaths shallow. Ahead, the forest opened into a clearing. In the center stood a grotesque structure, an organic hive made of blackened chitin, pulsating with a sickly red glow. Psylocke's drones scurried around it, their movements synchronized and efficient. This was their communications relay, the core of their hive network on the planet. Rin's eyes widened. That's it, he whispered. If we disable that, the swarm will lose coordination. Zara nodded. You've got 5 minutes to set up the disruptor. After that, we're out of time. What about the drones? Another Nervan asked, his voice trembling. Zara smirked and tightened her grip on her plasma rifle. Leave them to me. Rin and the engineers moved quickly, setting up the disruptor at the edge of the clearing. Zara stepped into the open, her presence drawing the attention of the Psylocke's drones. They paused, their red eyes locking onto her. Then, as if commanded by an unseen force, they charged. Zara didn't flinch. She fired a precise shot, taking down the lead drone. Another leaped toward her, but she sidestepped, swinging her rifle like a club to knock it aside. Her movements were fluid, almost instinctual, as she fought off the swarm. The Nervans watched in awe as Zara single-handedly held the Psylocks at bay. She's insane, one of them whispered. No, Rin said as he connected the final wire to the disruptor. She's a Deathworlder. The hive leader aboard the Psylocke's mothership observed the fight through the eyes of its drones. The Deathworlder was unlike any enemy it had faced. Her unpredictability and ferocity disrupted the swarm's efficiency. The hive leader sent a new command: eliminate her at all costs. From the hive structure, a new type of Psylocks emerged. Larger, faster, and more lethal, it bore heavy armor and blade-like limbs. It let out a piercing screech and charged toward Zara. Zara saw it coming and braced herself. This wasn't like the smaller drones. It was a predator designed to kill. The creature lunged, its blades slashing through the air. Zara rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack. She fired her plasma rifle, but the creature's armor absorbed the shot. Rin, she shouted, dodging another attack. How much longer? Almost there. He yelled back, his hands flying over the controls. The predator Psylocks pressed its attack, forcing Zara to retreat. She scanned the clearing, looking for something, anything, that could give her an advantage. Her eyes landed on one of the proximity mines she had planted earlier. Zara smirked. Come on, you ugly thing, she muttered, backing toward the mine. The Psylocks lunged again, and Zara sidestepped at the last moment, triggering the mine. The explosion sent the creature flying, its armor cracked and smoking. But the victory was short-lived. More drones poured out of the hive, their red eyes glowing with fury. Zara gritted her teeth. She couldn't hold them off much longer. Done. Rin shouted, slamming the final switch on the disruptor. The device hummed to life, emitting a high-pitched frequency. The effect was immediate. The Psylocks froze, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. Even the predator Psylocks staggered, its blades twitching. "It's working," one of the engineers exclaimed. "Good," Zura said, her voice strained. "Now let's get out of here before they adapt." The group retreated quickly, leaving the disrupted Psylocks behind. As they reached the edge of the forest, Zara turned to Rin. "You did good, kid," she said, clapping him on the shoulder. Rin smiled, his fear replaced by a sense of pride. "We all did." At the ridge, Terrell and the others watched as Zora's group emerged from the forest. They were battered and exhausted, but alive. "What happened?" Terrell asked as Zora approached. "We bought some time," she replied. "The disruptor worked, but it won't last. The Psylocks will adapt, and when they do, they'll come back stronger." Terrell frowned. "Then what's the next move?" Zora looked at the distant mothership, her expression hardening. "We take the fight to them." The final stand. The Psylocks mothership hung in the sky like a dark omen, casting its shadow over the ridge where Zara and the Nervans prepared for what could be their last battle. The disruptor had bought them precious time, but Zara knew the swarm would adapt. They always did. The Nervans, once trembling and uncertain, now worked with a quiet resolve. Energy barriers were reinforced, traps were laid, and weapons were double-checked. Zara moved among them, offering sharp advice and words of encouragement. "Check the charge on that," she told one Nervan holding a plasma cannon. "If it overheats, it'll blow up in your hands." She turned to Rin, who was fine-tuning the signal disruptor for another round of use. "Rin, make sure that thing holds. If it fails, we're out of options." Rin nodded, his hand steady despite the pressure. "I've made adjustments. It should hold longer this time." Terrell approached Zora, his face serious. "We're ready to move when you are." Zora glanced at the Nervans. They weren't soldiers, but they had become fighters. It wasn't just her survival on the line anymore. It was theirs too. Then let's give them something to fear. The plan was simple but dangerous. Infiltrate the Psylocks mothership, destroy the hive leader, and cripple their ability to coordinate the swarm. Without the hive leader, the Psylocks would revert to mindless chaos, giving the Nervans a fighting chance. Zora led the strike team, which included Terrell, Rin, and a handful of the strongest Nervans. The others stayed behind to hold the ridge, their task equally critical: keep the swarm distracted long enough for the strike team to complete their mission. As the strike team moved through the forest toward the Psylocks landing zone, Zora gave one final briefing. "This isn't about bravery or sacrifice," she said, her voice low and steady. "This is about survival. Stick to the plan. Trust your training, and don't hesitate. The second you hesitate, you're dead." Her words were harsh, but they struck a chord. The Nervans nodded, their fear replaced by determination. The Psylocks landing zone was a grotesque sight. Organic structures pulsed with an eerie red glow, and drones scurried about like ants. The air was thick with the sound of clicking and hissing, a constant reminder of the swarm's presence. Zara crouched behind a fallen tree, scanning the area with her visor. "There," she whispered, pointing to a transport pod near the hive's base. "That's our way in." Terrell frowned. "How do we get past all of them?" Zara smirked. "We make a distraction." Back at the ridge, the Nervans holding the line received Zora's signal. With a deep breath, they activated their traps. Explosions rippled through the forest, taking out clusters of Psylocks drones. Energy cannons fired from hidden positions, lighting up the night with bright blue flashes. The Psylocks swarm reacted immediately, shifting their attention toward the ridge. Thousands of drones surged forward, their red eyes glowing with rage. The Nervans fought valiantly, their newfound courage driving them to hold the line. "We're buying them time," one Nervan shouted as he reloaded his weapon. "Don't let up." The distraction worked. With most of the swarm diverted, Zara and her team moved quickly to the transport pod. Zara dispatched the few remaining drones with precise shots from her plasma rifle, her movements a blur of efficiency. The Nervans watched in awe, their respect for her growing with each passing moment. Inside the pod, the team found themselves surrounded by the alien, pulsating walls of the Psylocke hive. The organic structure felt alive, throbbing with a steady rhythm. Rin shuddered. "This place is wrong." Zara nodded. "That's why we're here. Stick close and keep quiet." The pod ascended, taking them into the heart of the mothership. As the doors opened, the team stepped into a vast chamber. At its center stood the hive leader, a towering, grotesque creature with multiple limbs and a crown of glowing red eyes. It exuded power and menace, its presence overwhelming. The hive leader turned to them, its voice echoing in their minds. "You dare to challenge the swarm?" Zara stepped forward, her weapon raised. "We don't just challenge," she said coldly. "We destroy." The battle that followed was chaos. The hive leader unleashed a deafening screech, summoning drones from every corner of the chamber. Zara and the Nervans fought desperately, their weapons blazing as they held their ground. Rin worked furiously to set up the disruptor, his hands moving with a speed born of fear and determination. "I need more time," he shouted as drones closed in. Zara threw herself into the fray, her plasma rifle cutting down enemies with lethal precision. She grabbed a nearby energy grenade, hurling it into a cluster of drones. The explosion rocked the chamber, giving Rin the opening he needed. "It's ready," Rin shouted, slamming the activation switch. The disruptor roared to life, sending out a wave of energy that rippled through the hive. The drones froze, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Even the hive leader staggered, its glowing eyes flickering. Zara seized the moment. She sprinted toward the hive leader, dodging its flailing limbs. With a final, determined shout, she planted a detonation charge at the base of its massive form. "Fall back," she yelled to the team. The Nervans ran for the pod as Zara set the timer. She glanced at the hive leader one last time, its form convulsing under the disruptor's influence. "You're done," she said, her voice cold. She sprinted to the pod, diving inside just as the charge detonated. The explosion ripped through the chamber, and the team barely escaped as the pod rocketed away from the mothership. Back on the ridge, the Nervans saw the explosion. The mothership shuddered and began to collapse, its structure breaking apart. The drones on the ground froze, their connection to the hive severed. Without coordination, they scattered, aimless and weak. A cheer erupted from the defenders as they realized what had happened. The swarm was broken. As Zara and her team returned to the ridge, the Nervans greeted them with awe and gratitude. Terrell approached Zara, his expression filled with newfound respect. "You did it." Zara shook her head. "We did it." The Nervans had faced their greatest fear and survived, and in doing so, they had proven to themselves, and to the Psylocke, that even the strongest swarm couldn't break their will to fight. The unstoppable power. The Psylocke's mothership's fiery collapse painted the sky in shades of red and orange, a testament to the Nervans' first real victory against the swarm. Cheers erupted on the ridge, the sound echoing across the devastated forest. But Zara didn't join in the celebration. She stood at the edge of the ridge, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Her instincts told her something wasn't right. The Psylocke weren't just a mindless swarm. They were parasites with a singular purpose: survival. And their hive leader's death wouldn't be the end. Terrell approached cautiously, his weapon slung over his shoulder. "You don't look like someone who just won a war." Zara didn't take her eyes off the horizon. "Because it's not over." Terrell frowned. "The mothership is gone. The swarm is broken. What more could there be?" Zara turned to him, her face grim. "The Psylocke don't give up. If they can't win here, they'll cut their losses and try to take the planet with them." Terrell's eyes widened. "You mean?" Zara nodded. "They'll activate a failsafe, a bioweapon, something designed to wipe out every living thing on this planet. Back at the Nervan Observatory, the news of the mothership's destruction had reached the elders. Relief spread through the room, but it was short-lived. Vila, watching the distant explosion through a telescope, noticed something strange. "There's a secondary signal," she said, her voice tense. "It's coming from the remains of the mothership." The elders crowded around her console. On the screen, a faint but growing energy signature appeared. It pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat, and its readings were off the charts. "What is that?" one elder asked, his voice trembling. Vila's face paled as she ran the data through her systems. "It's a planetary disruptor. If it goes off, it'll release a toxin that will spread through the atmosphere, killing everything." The room fell silent. The elders turned to Vila, their fear evident. "What do we do?" One of them whispered. "We contact Zora," Vila said firmly. "She's the only one who can stop it." At the ridge, Zora was already preparing for what she knew would come next. Rin approached her, carrying a portable scanner. "I've been monitoring the mothership's remains," he said. "There's a massive energy buildup. It matches the Psylocke's bioweapon signatures we've seen in the archives." Zara nodded. "Then we have no time to waste." Rin hesitated. "We've already lost so many people. Are you sure we can stop it?" Zara placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip firm but reassuring. "You don't stop to count losses in a fight like this. You focus on what's in front of you. We have a chance, and that's all we need." Zara, Terrell, Rin, and a handful of Mervans set out for the wreckage of the mothership. The journey was perilous, the ground still teeming with scattered drones that lashed out endlessly. Zara led the way, her movements precise and confident. The others followed closely, their trust in her absolute. As they neared the crash site, the air grew heavy with a strange metallic scent. The remains of the mothership loomed ahead, a jagged skeleton of twisted metal and organic material. At its center, the bioweapon pulsed like a massive, grotesque heart, its glow growing brighter with each passing moment. Zara surveyed the scene, her mind racing. "Rin, how do we shut it down?" Rin studied the readings on his scanner. "The weapon's core is protected by a force field. We'll need to disable it before we can get close." "And how do we do that?" Terrell asked. Rin hesitated. "We'll need to overload its power source. But doing that will draw every remaining drone to us." Zara smirked. "Then we give them a fight they'll never forget." The team split into two groups. Rin and a small team worked to set up an energy overload device near the weapon's power source, while Zara, Terrell, and the others held off the approaching drones. The battle was brutal. Drones swarmed from all directions, their red eyes glowing with rage. Zara fought like a force of nature, her plasma rifle blazing as she took down enemy after enemy. Terrell, inspired by her bravery, held his ground, his aim improving with every shot. "They just keep coming," Terrell shouted, blasting a drone that had gotten too close. "They always do," Zora replied, her voice steady. "That's why you don't stop." Meanwhile, Rin's team worked frantically. The energy overload device was unstable, sparking and humming as it neared activation. "Almost there," Rin shouted, his hands moving faster than ever. "Better hurry," Zora called back, taking out a particularly large drone with a well-placed grenade. Finally, the device activated. A surge of energy rippled through the area, disabling the force field around the bioweapon's core. Zara wasted no time. She sprinted toward the core, dodging drones and debris. She reached the control panel and began hacking into it, her fingers flying across the alien interface. The bioweapon's pulsing slowed, but its glow intensified. Zara's eyes widened. "It's too late to shut it down. We'll have to destroy it." She called out to Rin, "Get everyone out of here. Now." "What about you?" Rin shouted back. Zara didn't answer. She planted the last of her detonation charges around the core, her movements quick and deliberate. The countdown began, and she turned to run just as the drone surged toward her. The teen retreated to a safe distance, watching in horror as the mothership's remains erupted in a massive explosion. The shockwave knocked them to the ground, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then, through the smoke and fire, a figure emerged. Zara, battered but alive, stumbled toward them. The Nervans rushed to her, their cheers echoing in the now silent forest. "You're insane," Terrell said, a rare smile breaking across his face. Zara smirked. "You're welcome." Back on the ridge, the Nervans celebrated their victory. The Psylocke's threat had been neutralized, and their planet was safe, for now. The elders, humbled by Zora's leadership, approached her with gratitude. "You've given us more than survival," one elder said. "You've given us hope." Zora nodded but said nothing. Her gaze turned to the stars. She knew that Psylocks weren't the only threat out there. But for now, this planet had a chance to rebuild. As she prepared to leave, Rin approached her. "Will we ever see you again?" Zora smiled faintly. "You don't need me anymore. You've got what it takes to survive." With that, she boarded a Nervan transport ship, leaving behind a planet forever changed by the unstoppable power of a Deathworlder.